Did you know you could hit back incoming frag grenades with a shovel in Battlefield 1, at least at some point in development? DICE condemned this to the cutting floor for some reason, along with so many other features in the Battlefield franchise. Let's check them out. Battlefield 2 had a rideable wheelbarrow. It's not in the live game now, but even the voice work was recorded for it. It's good to see DICE were memers even back then. Battlefield Hardline was originally far more Battlefield than expected. One of the game's biggest gripes with fans is that its gameplay strays far from the classic Battlefield formula. But did you know that air combat was actually a thing? We can see this in the really old leaked gameplay trailer. That's an A-10 Warthog from the looks of it, so plane combat would have been military grade. Would you have liked to see this? Are you upset that this was cut? Let me know in the comments. Battlefield 1 had a playable Pigeon in multiplayer. I actually got to try this one out in a playtest for the Apocalypse DLC. Essentially, you threw the Pigeon like you would an SUAV in Battlefield 4. You could then control the Pigeon and spot enemies below. It wasn't added for obvious reasons, though it was actually pretty fun. Zavid Graveyard Shift was actually one of 2 night maps planned for Battlefield 4. A nighttime version of Siege of Shanghai called Invasion of Shanghai was also playable for quite a while in the community test environment. I really liked that map and always wished it made it to the final release. Unfortunately, there was too much work to be done and not enough time before development moved on to Battlefield 1. Did you know Battlefield 2 Special Forces had planned underwater content? An underwater rifle called the APS was cut from development. Not only that, but a spear gun was intended to release as part of the same DLC in Battlefield 2, but was also cut. Maybe DICE found it too hard to balance, or maybe it just wasn't worth the resources and time. Battlefield 1943 is definitely one of the more less played games in the series, but that could be because it was a console-only title. But DICE were actually working on a PC version of the game. Why development stopped isn't known, but maybe the team was busy working on Bad Company 2. Battlefield Hardline wasn't the only game to feature non-military vehicles. Battlefield 3 single-player mission Kafarov actually has a drivable SUV in the out-of-bounds area. Why is this here? Why is it drivable? Was it ever supposed to be in multiplayer? Who knows? Still a fun little secret though. In Battlefield 4's Final Stand DLC on the Hangar 21 map, the giant Titan inside the factory was originally intended to lift off during gameplay. While this would have been incredible to see, it demanded too much time from developers, as the developers have actually stated at least another 2 or 3 months work would have been needed to be done, which is just a little bit insane. I think the map we got in the end is more than brilliant. Speaking of Titans, in Battlefield 2142, did you know the original Titan mode was actually ground-based? Yep, that meant there were no VTOLs or pods. Instead, the mode played similarly to how Carrier Assault plays in Battlefield 4. Battlefield Vietnam had a tank cut from the game. It was called the Zippo and featured a massive flamethrower at the front. This gives me proper Vietnam vibes, so it's a pity it was cut. The flamethrower tank did show up, however, in Battlefield 5. Did you know a fully fleshed out trench digging mechanic was intended for Battlefield 1, a means of creating cover for yourself regardless of where you were on the map? Inevitably, it was cut due to balancing problems, but can still sort of be replicated in-game now with explosives. Maybe this was the early stages of DICE experimenting with the fortifications feature that we would see later on in Battlefield 5. The original Bad Company game featured a call-in or gadget that allowed the player to target enemy aircraft with a laser. The single-player character Haggard would then fire missiles at the target and speak over the voice comm. This sounds very Bad Company to me, but clearly cut for balancing reasons. Air superiority in the original Battlefield 1942 worked a little bit differently. It was more objective based in that you had to destroy enemy carriers in the water while also protecting your own. Visceral Games took a lot of risks with Hardline, but they had fun with it. They added some really wacky things, but did you know they actually planned on adding in a sort of Rocket League game mode? Set in cars, obviously, you'd need to score against your opponents, all the while taking fire from spectators and enemy cars. Considering Hardline released before Rocket League, who knows, maybe it could have been a bigger success. Battlefield 3 actually had a firing range, just like Battlefield 4 and 5. Thanks to an amazing group of modders who have gotten it working once again, we can now explore this piece of cut content. Maybe DICE felt that nobody would use it, or maybe it just wasn't worth their time. Traditionally in Battlefield games, you regenerate health through medkits, or more recently, med pouches. But DICE originally intended to equip medics in Battlefield 2142 with health darts. Rather than lay down a medkit, medics would shoot injured teammates with health darts. Seems a little aggressive, hence why they went with the classic medkit. Funny though that the pouches are sort of along the same lines. Battlefield Hardline introduced the Hotwire mode, but upon launch, players quickly realized that the RPGs were pretty overpowered. Visceral actually intended on adding a second Hotwire mode that banned RPGs, and it was even tested over on the community test environment. In the end though, the idea was scrapped because the developers didn't want to splinter the already low player count. Did you know Battlefield Vietnam was supposed to have some stealth gameplay in multiplayer? Creep out from the tree line and take out your enemies with throwing knives. I'm not quite sure why this was cut. It could have made for some different style of gameplay. Hardline's final DLC, called Betrayal, introduced some pretty cool maps like the Grand Bazaar remake and of course the Alcatraz map. But two other maps were actually originally intended to be added. A huge water-based map set in the Florida Keys and a close quarters map set in Fort Jefferson. The boat gameplay wasn't great in Hardline. It was a step down from Battlefield 4, which led to the Florida map being forgotten, and the developers found the Fort Jefferson map to be far too similar to the Alcatraz map, so it was scrapped as well. Gas grenades are one of the most frustrating things about Battlefield 1, but did you know DICE actually wanted to add them to Battlefield 2 way back then? Maybe it was a good idea to leave that one in the concept phase. Battlefield 4's big multiplayer highlight was Levolution, but strangely it was absent from the game's first DLC drop, China Rising. That wasn't always the plan. It was supposed to snow on Altai Range, thick fog would roll in on Dragon Valley, and a huge sandstorm would hit Silk Road. It's no surprise these were scrapped, as they probably would have had a very negative effect on the gameplay. Not only that, but DICE pretty much spent the first year fixing Battlefield 4, so content was actually scaled back quite significantly. Speaking of Levolution, Battlefield 1's Monte Grappa was planned to behave very like how the single-player map behaves. With enough damage done to the mountainside, a massive landslide would be caused. Maybe this was cut due to time constraints, or perhaps it messed with the gameplay too much. Either way, at least we get to see it in action in the single-player war story. We all know the Easter egg hunters in the Battlefield community are some of the best. They crack Morse code and find hidden items crazy quick, sometimes a little bit too quick. When the community map Operation Outbreak was still in testing on the CTE for Battlefield 4, DICE put into place a small bunker. This was in preparation for the Phantom Bow Easter egg. Unfortunately, the Easter egg hunters were too keen and managed to use the MAV gadget to see inside the bunker before it was finished. It's still there, even now. DICE level designer Matt Wagner shared this little secret about the Fort de Vaux map in Battlefield 1. Originally, he intended to include a huge walkway that went above the original map. This was probably a means of avoiding the choke points inside. Thankfully, he and the team decided to go against this walkway and embrace the inner chaos. He also shared this photo, a very early look at the map. Did you know Battlefield Vietnam originally had a booby trap system? I'm guessing this came in the form of explosive traps. DICE even intended on adding a wire cutter gadget to be used to defuse these traps. Sometimes games are held back by the previous generation console. This was the case with Battlefield 4. Due to memory constraints, a lot had to be cut. One such feature was the Riot Shield. Yes, it's in the game and acts pretty well as a gadget, but it was intended to be so much better. It could one-hit melee kill enemies, and you could even one-hand it and hold a sidearm alongside. This could have made this gadget a much more viable option in-game. Did you know Battlefield 2142 was supposed to feature one-player mech suits, not too different to the loader suits from the Alien movies? These could be deployed from heavier mechs as well. I'm not sure if they would have added much, if anything, to the game, so there's no surprise they were cut. With those secrets out of the way, let's change things up very briefly. The next 11 are all secret planned Battlefield 5 game modes that never saw the light of day. They were brought to light thanks to data miner Temporeal. They were presumably cut due to time constraints. Who knows? Maybe some of these will show up in future Battlefield games. First, we have Grand Operations in the Pacific. It was set to feature a water-based variant of Airborne called Seaborne. While this would have been good fun, I feel as though the Pacific playlists created on the community servers do a pretty good job, a good enough job. Squad Conquest Tournament was a more focused, round-based variant of Squad Conquest. It might have worked well, especially in low-populated server regions where full 64-player servers just can't be filled. Invasion sounded like great fun. Think of it like the Outpost mode, a variant of Conquest, except, well, better. Rather than building random radio towers, you instead build actual bases and resources like airstrips and tank bunkers and vehicle depots. I'm really hoping this mode actually shows up in Battlefield 2021. Capture the Flag was an idea for Battlefield 5, always a very good choice for first-person shooters. Gunmaster 2. It's been in quite a few Battlefield titles now, and BF5 would have been very nice. There's quite a variety of weapons in Battlefield 5, which would have made Gunmaster really fun. Conquer and Destroy is essentially 32v32 Rush, so no surprise why it wasn't added. Next up we have Final Standalone, and it's the standalone version of Final Stand. Interestingly, I'd love to know how many of you lads have actually played Final Stand in the base game. For those that don't know, it's the final day, well, a bonus day of a grand operation that very rarely comes around. Next we have Operation. No, not the board game, though that would be interesting. Operation was the planned return of the fan favourite BF1 Operations mode. Essentially BF5's breakthrough mode, but with several battalions as backup. So much better in my opinion. Battle Zone is an interesting one. It's a 32-man mode spread across 5 rounds. Again, it reminds me a lot of Grand Operations, so no surprise why it never made it to the live game. 8v8 Tank Superiority was also planned for Battlefield 5, but was canned during development. It could have been fun. At least we can make our own servers now with community games. And at last, of course, the 5v5 competitive mode that we learned so much about last summer. It was supposed to feature unique characters and archetypes with different abilities. Honestly, it sounded as if it could have been its own game, but like we know, it was scrapped during development. 11 modes that didn't quite make it into Battlefield 5, but like I said, who knows, maybe we'll see some variation of these in Battlefield 2021. To round off the video, let's conclude this list with 10 more secrets that you may have missed. There's a spaceship in Battlefield 3. No, seriously. On the Operation Riverside map that came with the Endgame DLC, you can spot this ship just hovering. It was presumably a nod to the Mass Effect series, that was releasing its games around the same time and is also an EA-owned IP. Otherwise, this is just a throwback to Battlefield 2142. Did you know a lot of the history facts covered in the Battlefield 1 Codex were gathered and written by the YouTube channel, The Great War? They've made some seriously good videos over there, and if you're a fan of history, especially the Great War, well, definitely check them out. I also know another creator here on YouTube helped out with some of the Battlefield 5 history points, but I won't name them. Try and guess who it is. I'm sure you all know them. Battlefield 1 is still the best-selling title in the series. But did you know Battlefield 3 actually held that title until Battlefield 1 came around in 2016? With just 1.3 million copies sold, Battlefield Vietnam is the least sold title of the main games. Do you remember the Under No Flag mission from Battlefield 5? The character George Mason may sound familiar to those of you that played Call of Duty games. The voice actor's name is Craig Fairbrass and is actually the same voice actor that did the original voice for Ghost in Modern Warfare 2.
Oh. And you're just strolling off? Oh, Bridge, you're liven yourself up, come on. There's a lovely little ice cream shop down there and I'm treating you to a cornet.
Did you know there have been 2 occasions where EA have partnered with an external studio to work on either a Battlefield TV show or a movie? In 2012, Fox squadded up with EA to develop a television show based on the Bad Company series, and then again in 2016, Paramount wanted to work on a Battlefield TV show. Who knows if either of these will ever happen on screen. You know the Katana in Battlefield 5? It's such a fun addition to the game. But did you know with each kill you actually regen health faster, and the heavier thrust attack immediately regens health as well, so it's actually quite smart to vary up your attacks. Little known fact actually, and yes, I'm making this its own secret because I really am stretching here to this 50. DICE actually have their actual katana in the offices in Stockholm. It was given to them by some of the Japanese game changers during the Pacific Capture event last October. Having held it myself, it makes you feel like the most badass person in the room. Did you know that on the Operation Whiteout map in Battlefield 4 you can actually break off a piece of ice and use it as a melee weapon? It's a nice touch that adds to the humiliation of melee kills. On the Rupture map in Battlefield 1, if you go right to the back of the map, behind some bushes into the out of bounds area, you can actually spot a very clear reference to the Dark Souls games. Having only this year become addicted to the Soulsborne games, I finally got the reference properly and just had to include it in today's video. Over on the Battlefield 5 Wake Island map, there is actually a small plaque right down the end of the beach that reads, "To those who fought here in 1942, Battlefield 2, 2142, 1943, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 5. We are grateful." Wake Island has shown up in all of the mentioned Battlefield games, and this plaque in particular was also in Battlefield 3. And now, number 50. Thank you for sticking around until the end. We have Codename Eagle. This was a first-person shooter developed by a studio called Refraction Games, and is considered the spiritual precursor to the entire Battlefield franchise. It was released in the year 2000 and is based on the familiar Refractor engine. That might sound familiar since it's the engine all Battlefield games were made on until the first Bad Company game. DICE bought Refraction Games, and thus the Battlefield franchise was born. That's not all though. The game, Codename Eagle, was an alternate World War I game set in Russia. And the day before the Battlefield 1 reveal event, an ex-DICE employee tweeted out, "In the run-up to DICE's Battlefield 5 announcement today, why not do some random reading?" And then he linked the Codename Eagle wiki. This obviously got everyone, including me, very excited, as it all but confirmed that the rumoured World War I setting for the game. Still though, I often wonder what Battlefield 1 would have looked like if it took the codename Eagle to the next level and DICE made their own alternate timeline game. Maybe someday. But that's it. There you go, a grand total of 50 secrets that you may not have known about the Battlefield series. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. It was a lot of work to put this whole thing together, but a lot of fun at the same time. If you did enjoy, leave the video a like and maybe share it around. If you can think of any other secrets you'd like covered in a part 2, share them down below in the comments. Maybe we could do another video like this, but a community's favorites version. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, especially if you've watched all the way to the end. Make sure you subscribe for more Battlefield content from me, but until the next one, I'll see you lads later.